One of my favorites. Love having him on. He makes me smarter from Sports Illustrated, joining us here to also explain why Ohio State's sending quarterbacks to the next level, feeling robotically penned in by things like reads and progressions. Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Albert?
Did you catch the Texans game on Sunday?
That's true. He did look. He is looking good. CJ Stroud looks comfortable, Albert. He does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're very different players. It's interesting from the same place, but very, very different players, obviously.
All right, that's my churlish way of beginning our conversation. What happened in Chicago yesterday? Let's start with Justin Fields. First, Albert.
I would say it's interesting because I do think it was blown a little out of proportion, because I think if you read the tweet that kind of blew up, you thought one thing, and it got my attention because I was like, God, that doesn't sound like Justin, And then I went back and I watched what he actually said, and it wasn't really where he just said coaching is the problem. It was more, I have a lot going on in my head right now. There's a lot rattling around up there while I'm standing in the pocket, and coaching is part of that. What sort of coaching, how much coaching I'm getting, and I want to go back and get to a place where I can play fast and free again. And so, what I can tell you about the internal handling of that is things really blew up while they were in the practice field. And so the Bears are out there practicing. Everybody's going nuts over this on Twitter. They get back in. Justin gets to his locker, looks at his phone, sees the world is melting down about what he said at his press conference, immediately ran to Luke Getsy, their offensive coordinator's office, and they talked it out. Those two have a really good relationship. And there wasn't even really anything that needed to be squashed, I guess, because there wasn't a problem in the first place. But Justin did apologize, and they were able to move on really quickly. Now, that said, let's talk about the root of this, right? The tape is really bad. And I've heard that from people with teams that are on the Bears schedule, that have played the Bears. The tape isn't good. And there's a lot that needs to be solved there. And in Justin's comments, there's a lot to chew on. I just think the whole idea that he was pointing the finger was misplaced to begin with and taken care of quickly internally.
Well, what he did say, because I didn't see the tweet at first. I heard the soundbite at first. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and the way I took it to mean is that the coaching is an impediment. That is the way I took it to mean. And if, just to be consistent, that if I'm going to sit here and roast Zach Wilson last year for sounding as if he's not responsible for letting the locker room down, and him saying, well, why are you playing robotically? And his answer is coaching. Well, maybe that's a way of saying I'm not, taking understanding the coaching or processing the coaching, or I'm letting the coaching getting in my head too much, which is a him problem. That's not a Getsy problem. And what Getsy is trying to do, just to continue this conversation, I imagine, is to keep Justin Fields upright and in the pocket. And the faster he gets comfortable and not feeling robotic, standing in the pocket and running the plays as they're schemed, the better for him. But I'm just wondering, after what he said, that maybe you just go to him and just say, let's throw everything out that makes you feel robotic and keep everything in that doesn't, and seeing what happens in Kansas City. And now I give you the floor back on that supposition.
Yeah, I think there are two things to look at here, Rich. Number one, they felt like they needed him to be Superman last year, and they don't feel like they need him to be Superman anymore. The roster was in such disrepair last year. They were carrying all the dead cap. They were trying to make it work with not much in front of him. They were, I'd say, deficient at receiver also. There wasn't much they did well on offense last year. So if they were going to win last year, they felt like Justin Fields had to be Superman. And so they played that way. And the second piece of it is they don't think that playing the way they did last year is sustainable. And I think Justin Fields' injuries, the way his body was at the end of the year, is proof positive of that. That might look good in the short term, but that's not going to be something that's going to be sustainable over years for the franchise. So, you look at that part of it, and then you got to juxtapose it against what, a traditional NFL quarterback does, and, in maybe the Brady Manning sense, and Justin's really far from being that. So, how do you find the happy medium? And this is a guy who, coming out, like what Ryan Day and the coaches at Ohio State all said was he just needs reps. He needs to play more. He needs to see more. He hasn't seen enough. And he doesn't see it fast enough right now. And so, like, how do you kind of find that happy medium between what you want him to be ultimately, which he's not that right now, and what he's really good at and can do right now? And I think, like a huge part of this, when you're adding Darnell Wright in the draft and you're adding DJ Moore in a trade, is like, how do we find that happy medium in doing what Justin does well, continuing to grow him as a player and getting the most out of the players we've put around him? And clearly the Bears have struggled with that a little bit, and I think you can see it watching Justin. I mean, look, there was a point at Ohio State, between when they had J.K. Dobbins and between when Trey Sermon went nuts at the end of his last year, they had trouble running the ball. And you could see when the running game was taken away from him and when they weren't running the ball as well as a team, he'd stand there in the pocket and it was almost like he would doubt what he was looking at. And they were good enough around him where they could protect him in those situations, and he had open guys to throw to. In the NFL, it's a little more challenging when everything's talent equated, and now you don't have that extra second to sit in the pocket and hold the ball. And so, they either need to find a way to help him see it faster or simplify things on him. And that's all going to be a process. But, I certainly think they feel better about the team around him. They feel better about the offense than they did a year ago, as bad as it looked through 2 weeks. And, it feels almost like moving away from what they did last year to make it work with Justin, to make it work for the players they had on the team last year. It's almost like they're, sort of hitting the reset button and starting over again on offense.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.